Sorry, Greg, I think you just gave me an introduction, but I can't hear you at the moment, mate.
I
There
did,
you
mate.
are.
I did. Yeah. Welcome everybody to another Monday night Sonar Masterclass. Once again, technology's got the better of us. I think it's COVID, mate. I'm going to blame COVID anyway. How are you going down there in Melbourne, mate? How's the weather?
Yeah, very good, very cold, and yeah, surviving lockdown pretty good at the moment. So yeah, we're doing okay. Can't get out fishing as much as I'd like to, given the weather, but it's okay. We're surviving at the moment.
Yeah, I said we get a chit chat for a little while, mate, just to let a few people come into the room because it takes a little while
Yep.
before people get here. But mate, I noticed they're allowing you guys to fish this time round with the lockdowns, but I also noticed that somebody got fined for going out for a fish.
I think they got a fine. So my understanding of the rules at the moment is local within reasonable travel is allowed. So fishing within the Melbourne metropolitan within a reasonable. So if you were to travel to your nearest boat ramp or thereof, where I'm situated, I'm quite lucky. I have two boat ramps within 10 or 15 minutes, and I think if I were to go to either, I'd be okay. But this gentleman travelled from maybe
One sort
Keilor in
of.
the northern suburbs of Melbourne all the way to the Mornington Peninsula, whereabouts, who knows. So it's a good 45 minute to an hour journey from where he was at least.
Now,
So
Anton,
immediate family is okay. You can fill your boat with people under the same household, or one other person kept bearing social distancing. So
yeah. Now,
that's a
Anton,
little bit.
I'm going to stop you there because I'm getting some comments coming through that your screen is upside down, mate. You want to flip your phone up the other way? So for you guys that are at home, it comes up the right way up on our screen. Tell us now if we're the right way up, please. So, folks, when you come into the room, let us know whether you, first of all, where you're coming in from, and now tell us whether we have the screen up the right way, because it's quite frustrating and very difficult. It's thanks to Apple. I'm blaming Apple for that, so I'm not going to blame COVID for that one, mate. Okay, thank you, Josh. So now we've got our screen up the right way. Thank you to Abra. Thank you to Steve. Guys, let us know where you're coming in from as well. Anton's upside down. He must be in England. All good. Robert Portelli, thanks, mate. Adam, Josh. Okay, so we've got plenty of people coming to the room, and what's more, we're the right way up tonight now, so we can speak more freely and people can focus on what we're saying, mate.
More technical difficulties then.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how many times you test it. It's when you go live, everything suddenly falls apart or goes smoothly either way. But so we've got Steve coming in from Brisbane. We've got Jai from Perth, Josh from Sydney. We've got Jason from Tassie, Simon Webster from East Gippsland, Jay Huxley from the Sunshine Coast. Welcome along, guys. Josh from the Northern Beaches. So people starting to stream in. Dean Cummings from Gisborne. Campbell from Mornington, Graham from Tasmania. Only place to be, he says. I don't know, mate. I lived in Tassie for a long time. It's pretty cold down there at this time of year. I like it up here, so I'm in shorts and T-shirt, mate. I don't know about you. So we've got Steve Galvin from Shepparton. We've got Justin from Mackay. We've got Robert from Woohoo, Sydney. So good on you guys. Plenty more people coming in. Dale from Eagle Point. So look, we will kick off in just a moment, mate. We've given people a bit of a chance to come into the room. So thank you, everybody, for letting us know that you're hearing us okay. Thank you for correcting our screen orientation issue, and we might start to get onto the presentation now. So what we're going to do today, folks, a little bit different to the previous live streams. Anton's got quite a good PowerPoint presentation that he's going to go through. So we're going to have a really good look at some of the basics of Sonar, and then Anton's going to walk us through different transducers and how they work. Am I right there, mate?
Yeah, that's it. Yep.
Yeah. So what
we'll
I'll
start
do
off with a little bit of sonar theory, how transducers work to help us better understand current angles, the frequencies, how they transmit, the pulses that they transmit, and that'll help us to better select a transducer that would suit our fishing style. So all the time you hear lots of people talk about, I need a 1 kilowatt transducer. Well, hang on, you need a bit more than just a 1 kilowatt. What type of beam width, what type of angle, what type of frequency, what are you running? It's a little bit more, I shouldn't say more complex. It's actually quite simple when you break it down, but should help improve us and get you some better fishing results, just to help you understand that a bit better.
Yeah, because we all look at the screen and we all try and decipher what's on the screen, but really the transducer is the heart of your sonar. If you get that wrong, you're really limiting the ability of your yin. And of course, it's a bit like cars and boats and everything else. There's not one size fits all. So it's a case of figuring out, what you really need for the style of fishing you do. Am I right? All right, mate.
That's
Look,
right.
what I'm going to do.
The areas that people fish vary as much as the people itself. Now, from inshore estuaries, rivers, dams, offshore, marlin fishing to bottom bashing for flathead, your kingies. I mean, we are lucky where we are in Australia, and obviously just through the introduction just before, people from all over the country. So hopefully we can point them in the right direction when it comes to selecting a transducer.
Excellent stuff. All right, mate. Look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ugly mug out of the picture, mate, and I'm going to put up your PowerPoint presentation. Now, you'll come up in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen.
Yep.
Folks, you'll be able to hear me. You'll be able to hear Anton. You'll be able to see the slides. What we're going to ask you to do as Anton goes through this presentation is if you've got questions, post them in the chat there. I'll bring them up on the screen, and that way we can answer the questions as we go, so that we're answering questions that are relative to the current slide rather than having to go back through the slide deck later on. So feel free to ask questions. If we don't get questions, we're just going to keep rattling on. So you need to ask your questions if you want them answered. So look, let me switch over now to the other camera. Let's bring up the PowerPoints, which will take me just a moment. There we go.
There we go. So hopefully everyone can hear my voice over this quite well. At least you don't have to suffer looking at me any much longer, except for the little box in the corner. So quite simply, we're just going to go through a little bit of sonar. At the end of the day, we want to catch fish. We all have some fantastic electronics available to us. Some of the sounders that we have available to us these days are awesome. To have the technology at our fingertips for the price, regardless of brand, some of the different units available on the market go back 5, 10, 15 years. Some of the things that we can do these days are unheard of. So we are quite lucky in that way. So we'll go over to the next slide. Just very quickly, understanding how sonar works. We'll have a quick talk about downscan, sidescan. Settings I won't talk about too much, but there's a little bit in there, and we'll just talk about some of the different types of transducers available and go through some of the theory behind what we're looking at when it comes to choosing a transducer to suit the style of fishing that we have to do. So we can go over to the next one. Sonar. Sound, navigation, and ranging. That's all sonar stands for. So this is what we are doing when we're looking into the water. We're allowing our electronics to be able to navigate particular areas that we're looking at, which is in their cone angle, which will go on to the next screen again there. How sonar works. Quite simply, we have a transducer, the little infographic here showing a pulse that goes down. It bounces off various surfaces, fish mid-water, the ground at the bottom, transmits, comes back up, and it also receives those frequencies, and those sounds get converted to an image that you see on the screen. So all these little squiggly lines and all the different colors all represent something that you see on the screen. So this is the best thing to do, is to be able to understand in simple terms how this works, to be able to, we've got a question already, Mark Thornton, best 1 kilowatt transducer for Simrad screen to mark fish reef. High Chirp, narrow beam. We'll go through that in a little bit more detail later, but we'll definitely be able to cover that with a bit more info. We'll go over to the next screen. We've got a little bit more when you're looking at your screen, when we all love to see this nice, beautiful boomerang that represents a fish arch. So as that fish enters the cone, we see quite a little weak, narrow return. As it goes into the center of the beam, it gets thicker, and as it exits our cone beam, it goes narrow again. So that's how the arch is painted. So either the boat is moving, or the target, being the fish, is moving through our beam if we are still. Different speeds will paint a different picture. So different size targets, the wider cone, the wider angle will all give us quite a different reading. If you're stopped, that line will be flatter and longer. If you're going a little bit faster, that arch or boomerang that you're seeing there could be quite a bit shorter. If the transducer is on a particular angle, that full arch will turn up more like an eyebrow or an upside down tick facing one way or the other. That would sort of point to the direction of which way your transducer angle is facing. If that, hopefully that makes a bit of sense to you guys. So the next screen has just got a little bit more detail on when a fish touches the edge of the beam, it starts with a very small, very thin mark and starts to paint the picture. When it goes to the next part, it starts to get thicker. The fish is in the center of the beam and has the strongest signal, the strongest return that's bouncing back. And then when it exits, it finishes that. This isn't an ideal world. It all depends on how the boat is moving and how it transitions. And we'll go through some of the screenshots a little bit later and I'll give you a bit of an interpretation of what you'll see and what you're looking at when it comes to some of these images. Now the next screen helps give a bit of an understanding. We've sort of compressed point A, point B, point C into the little boomerang. You should be able to see there the little arch. So if you have a narrow cone angle, we'll call this one's 20 degrees, and when it paints a picture, it paints that little arch above the ground over the depth, and that's the return of the signal. So that's what we're getting when the signal bounces there and back. Click that again. That little arch that can be interpreted in a 20-degree cone angle has to have travelled, meters through your beam from your transducer. So you'll see the difference there when you're actually looking at it. If we go to the next screen, we'll see an example of a wider cone angle. The fish spends a lot more time within that cone angle. We'll paint a larger arch. Now onto the next screen here. We have an example of a narrow cone angle. Now this goes back to the question that the gentleman just asked before. What type of transducer is better? We always have to take into consideration the cone angle or the beam width. Whenever what type of area that you're targeting. In this image that you're seeing, sorry, go to the next, that's it. So in this image that you're seeing here, you'll see a narrow beam. Typically your high chirp, your 200 kilohertz frequencies, and some of your medium frequencies these days can be on the narrower side. There are fish there. The boat is focusing on a particular area. The transducer is painting a picture. You will see only 2 fish are visible. Click over. You'll see, although you get a lot of high detail with a high chirp or the 200 kilohertz, you could be missing a little bit of detail either side. Then you go on to the next screen. Wide angle, medium, low chirp, your 50 to 83 kilohertz, and also this goes into consideration for some of your newer, like your high wide transducers. You're getting a lot of good detail. If you have a flat bottom, you will pick up a lot of fish. You'll mark those arches and those boomerangs a lot more solid and a lot more easier. So your fish finding ability increases, but there is a but. When we are dealing with a flat surface, go on to the next screen. If the bottom isn't flat, you're actually going to be missing a little bit of information. You might, like, while a high wide is quite good, in a scenario like this, we have what's called target masking or contour masking. So you may actually miss that little undulation there that you can see in the middle of the screen. So if you go to the next screen, the sonar doesn't paint the full picture of what you're seeing. The depth finder will actually bounce off the top of the rock and may actually hide the fish that will be there on the edge, you may miss them. So click over to the next one. The narrow versus wide beam, regardless of the actual frequency choice, you'll see there's pros and cons for. So narrow beam, very good for undulating ground, reefy structures, trying to find fish in all your little nooks and crannies. Wide beam gives you more coverage, but not so good for rocky, reefy ground, very undulating ground, drop-offs, sharp drop-offs and ledges may actually hide some fish in some structure. So what's the answer here? So click through this one. Your best case scenario, if you have two frequencies, run them both, and you'll actually be able to see a lot more. You'll be able to get your good bottom picture. You'll be able to see that all 5 fish are visible on the sounder, and you'll get a lot more information. How you interpret that is hopefully we can help with that. So go on to the next screen.
So, Anton, before we go on to the next screen, we do have a couple of questions that have come up. So I'll put some of those up on the screen, or perhaps bring you up on the screen to answer them. So,
yep.
Ian McKay is asking, are transducers able to pick up squid? Do they have a signal return?
Yes. The difficult thing with squid, they spend a lot of their time hiding and they sit close to the bottom, so actually picking them up is quite difficult, but you can pick them up. There is actually, using a Chirp transducer with the Nexonic plug with your Simrad and Lowrance, I'm not too familiar with the other brands, there is a particular frequency that you can dial in that will help identify squid better. So for me, I do a lot of squid fishing. I love my squid fishing. Fishing places like Port Phillip Bay and Western Port, it's not so much marking up the squid, it's marking up the ground. You'll be able to pick up the weed and the rubble and the bottom, the areas that they like to hide in, and you'll be able to target those areas. But I know myself and a few other people I know have actually marked squid, and they'll be certain that you'll be able to see squid on your sounder. So yes.
There you go, Ian. So that hopefully answers that question for you. So we've got one from Graham Purton as well. What ping speed do you find best with 50 kilohertz in very deep water, 400 meters plus?
50 kilohertz slows. Oh, g'day, Pert. Graham from Tasmania. Yeah. Your ping speed is actually quite a bit slower when you're running 50 kilohertz or your low chirp. The number of pulses per minute is a quarter of what you'd get with your high frequencies. So keeping that ping speed up, if you're at a drift and you are slowing down, you can pull your ping speed back to match your drift. Personally, when I'm fishing deep water, I don't adjust the ping speed. I do look at the information. I don't want to miss anything. There may be something passing under the boat in a period of time that you may miss a bit of information. For me personally, I'd rather have too much information than not enough. So I hope that. Yes, so pinpointing more accurately for reef fish for high chirp would benefit from narrow beam. High chirp, high frequency gives you a lot of detail, gives you paints good bottom picture. You do lose those the arches, the boomerangs, the nice little arches that you get. It's a lot harder to get with a narrower beam, but having high chirp and a narrow beam is ideal in very reefy ground. There's always a bit of a compromise. So you lose a bit of the fish coverage, you lose a bit of the target ID, but if you're bottom fishing in reefy ground, your narrow beams high chirp, and I also do recommend people going for like a medium chirp. Some of the 1 kilowatts like the TM185M or the TM185M, which is a medium chirp, gives you the best of both worlds. Gives you depth penetration. They usually have a slightly narrow beam than some of the high wides, and will paint a good bottom and also give you the good fish target identification.
Good stuff. All right, another question here from Joel Matthew Graham asking, can you pick up sharks on your sonar?
100%. 100%. We have marked sharks while drifting. You'll see a little line appear, and then you'll see the line appear a bit higher up in the water column. Used to love my mako shark fishing here in Bass Strait. Been lucky enough to be able to target them around the state and also interstate. Yeah, you do pick up sharks. It's a nice big solid object. They do move pretty quick sometimes, but yeah, you'll get them.
So Mark asking, would that be the B275 LHW?
B275 LHW. So the 275 LHW is a 1 kilowatt, low, high, wide. It's a dual channel chirp transducer. So it gives you low frequency and your high frequency in a wide beam configuration. They are very popular for good reason, because they give you both channels at a price point only a little bit more than some of the other single channel transducers, and the ability to go deep with your low frequency. Like we've had some sonar readings. I've seen some screenshots of well over 1,000 meters deep and hitting bottom with some good detail, and giving you also the high wide for your offshore. If you are an offshore fisherman, if you're targeting pelagics, if you're going into deep water, there's probably not much better than that transducer. The B is a bronze configuration. It's actually a big keel mounted one. So if you do have a large boat, it's not a bad choice, but there's a couple alternatives to that one as well that comes in. That's what you just installed in your keel. So so you've got a fair-sized boat, I'm assuming, so that would be a really good choice. So pelagics, fish finding ability, mid-water, top water, the high-wide, you won't get better. That is simply one of the best options for in pelagic marlin, tuna fishing, shark fishing, and mackerel, all those sorts of fish that you might get quite high. And if you do go out a bit wider and go a bit deeper, yeah, I don't think you'll be disappointed with that. So yeah, I can see that, Mark. You'll be very happy with that one. I have the transom mount version of that on my boat.
All right. Question from Josh about using high chirp when looking for tuna and sounding the top 100 meters.
Yep, 100%. I know that not quite sure what if you're in the southern states. Targeting tuna with high chirp, the high wide again is an excellent choice. Marking up bait and being able to pick up those pelagic that would hang around. So again, top 100 meters of water, no matter how deep you're in. And I'm going to refer to a Simrad unit here. That if you're or even a Lowrance, I mean, you can definitely target in. As Paul has a party. Welcome, mate. We have, yeah, the high wide for tuna. The top water column is a great option. The dual channel chirp that the gentleman brought up before with the 275 low, high, wide. There's a function with if you're lucky enough to have a Simrad unit, you can set your high wide to maybe your top 100 meters, top 150 meters of water, and then you can set your low chirp to scan the whole water column, or maybe from 150 meters down to the bottom. It's one of the only units that are actually capable of doing that in the offshore. So yeah, great choice.
All right. We've got another couple of questions, mate, and then we might just go back to the PowerPoint. So Andrew Smith asking about, he's got a HDS Gen 3.
Yep.
With, well, I'll let you read it, but he's thinking of upgrading to the Evo 3. Is the transducer compatible with the Simrad?
100%. So the HDS Gen 3 with an SS1H5 high wide, compatible to an Evo 3 or an Evo 3S? Yes. Now from the Gen 3, you'll have a blue transducer plug on the back. all it will need is a small adapter cable, which will do your blue plug to Exonic, your Exonic plug if it's on the Evo 3 and the Evo 3S. They've got the 9-pin black plugs on the back of the unit, but yeah, 100% compatible.
Excellent stuff. Now, I'll just put up this question from, when I can get it to come up, from Justin, and it may not give us the whole question, so I'll read it to you. But okay. I think we may be going to talk about this a bit later on in the presentation, Anton.
Actually,
so
we'll be breaking that down and give you a bit of an info, a bit of a picture to highlight that. So, summary: high chirp, multiple frequencies pulsing at the same time, 200 kilohertz pulses within a very small range. Yeah, not as much detail, as simple as that.
So, Justin, sit tight. We're going to have a bit more of an explanation of that a bit later on with some PowerPoints and things.
Actually, I think it might be one of the next couple of screens coming up.
Well, let's bring them up on the screen, shall we, Anton, and move on. So, the next slide, so split screen.
Split screen, simple as that, yeah. Being able to run, this is a very old picture here, but yeah, being able to run the narrow and wide together, paints a good picture, gives you the best of both worlds. Fish finding, paints a good picture of the depth, and can show you a lot more detail. If we go across to the next one, Chirp. Everyone hears about Chirp and wonders what it is. It is actually compressed high intensity radar pulse. Chirp technology has been around, I believe, even since the World War II. It was used in radar, some of the military technologies. Only recently, in the last few years, it has transitioned across to Sonar. So the next screen will give you a bit of an idea of the difference between Chirp and how it works. Standard Sonar, 200 kilohertz, is one frequency pulsing up and down. High Chirp pulse, various frequencies, a lot more energy is put into the water, and a lot more is returned back to the transducer to listen. Some people likening maybe instead of firing a rifle, you're shooting a machine gun at a target and listening to what it has to say when it comes back. The next screen, so coming through a little bit blurry. So on the left-hand side, the traditional Sonar will come up a little bit more blobby, and your targets, your individual targets, may blend together as one blob. The Chirp Sonar on the right-hand side will actually identify individual targets. You'll be able to pretty much count fish when it's set up properly, and you're traveling in some pretty good conditions. You'll be able to pick up individual fish where before you may have just had blobs. Simple as that. I hope that answered the gentleman's question before.
So just a bit of a sidebar here, Aaron.
E175L, having trouble picking up bottom underway. Any tips? Biggest thing, I'll touch on it a little bit more in a minute too. One of the biggest issues we have with transducers is poor placement. People, if it's not working properly underway, poor placement. Now, the 175L is a lower frequency wide beam. They are prone to a lot more noise from your hull. And if there's a little bit of a little bit of chop on the water, it's a bit dirtier, you will not pick up bottom as well. The low, I have seen some installations with low frequency, low chirp transducers marking bottom at speed in reasonable depth, but you start to lose it a lot quicker than you would high chirp. But high chirp is limited with your depth penetration, but you get a lot more information, and it's a lot easier to get good bottom reading at speed.
On to the next slide, mate.
On to the next slide. This is a high chirp. I think it's a one. I think this is a snapper on some reefy ground, but you're just showing the difference there. Nice bottom, good solid bottom, and individual targets. You can see the fish are clearly identified, where with a 200 kilohertz or a non-chirp transducer, some of those fish that are close together in the image there will blend into one red blob, as opposed to having the several squiggly lines. If you go on to the next one, this is an early chirp from a HDS, I'm going to say it's a HDS Gen 3. This was a gentleman fishing, I think it's Norway, and there's a fish called whitefish. These are a school of fish that are approximately about 400, 500 mil long in 38 meters of water. And when you look at the difference, you can see fish after fish. There's so many. So where they're really, really tightly grouped together, they start to blend into one. But then all these, this guy's onto a bit of a bonanza here with his fish choice. There is so shallow water compared. Is there a problem with using high chirp in shallow water compared with traditional sonar? Some units running high chirp in shallow water, say maybe 5 meters, maybe up to 10, can be a little bit problematic at times, depending on the conditions. So using a 200 kilohertz, and it depends on your unit and depends on the installation. There can be an issue with shallow water. By shallow, we're talking 5, maybe 10 meters. Can be a bit problematic. Switching over to 200 kilohertz is not a problem with a chirp transducer. You may get better results.
So Dinko's asking, mate, whether water slap affects your sonar readings.
If you're referring to the way water hits your hull, any disturbed water will affect the reading of sonar, no matter what, where, or how. Any air bubbles, air pockets, waves, anything that passes over your transducer. Air bubbles are probably the enemy to any transducer. Anything that passes under the face of that transducer will cause interference and will show up as noise on your screen. Bottom at 25, yeah. So Kim just...
Yep, so we've got Cameron now saying he needs some help. He's got a problem with an Evo 12-inch with SS175HW losing temperature when he's over the shelf.
Two things: making sure you have the latest software update on the unit. There was a glitch a few updates a little while ago that may have caused the sonar to the temperature to fluctuate or to lose temp. And the other thing is also to help with a manual depth setting on the Simrad units. If you set your depth to, instead of being on auto, set it to the depth of where you want it to be, it may help with that.
All right, and one more question, mate, and then we'll go back to our presentation again. Yep. So we've got James asking whether he's able to tune out the chirp from other boats that are interfering in his low chirp.
If you are fishing close proximity to other boats and they are running the same transducer as you, no, it's very hard. Unfortunately, crosstalk from other transducers in boats close to you is a problem. Because you have the sonar pulsing, it'll bounce back and it comes and hits your boat. It's very difficult. You can, depending on what unit you're running, there may be an option to Simrad units have a color erase. You may be able to get a bit of that noise reduced. You may be able to dial back your sensitivity a little bit to help reduce that interference. But unfortunately, this is a phenomenon. You just have to ask people to stop fishing in your spots. That's simple.
Go find new spots where there aren't any people, James.
That's
that
right.
answers your question. All right, Anton, let's go back to our PowerPoint. So I think we're ready to move on to the next one.
Yep. What do we got next? Transducers. Just a little quick overview. Yep. Different types of transducers. So the transom mount on the top right hand of your screen. The left one is your typical skimmer transducer. Your HDI, your total scan have got all that similar sort of shape. The one on the right hand side will be more like your structure scan, your 3-in-1, your 2-in-1. They do have a bit of a longer, funny shape of the metal bracket. There's a few different brackets you can get. Your through hulls, in hulls, pod and pocket mount. So your through hull, the gentleman before that said his B275 low, high, wide, the one with that blue fairing block next to it with the big brass housing, that's designed for your larger, a lot larger boats, because it does have a significant presence. If you see one in the flesh, you realise how big they actually are. They're quite impressive, and it does protrude through the hull like a small keel. The one next to it is like a pocket mount, where it actually fiberglass into your hull and may sit level or just proud of your hull when it's mounted. Some of the newer transducers and electric motors are very popular with a lot of lure fishermen in the estuary and the inshore. You can actually mount transducers with various brackets to the front of a little electric motor. And the one down the bottom right hand, the yellow box, is a wet box mount. So very similar to some of the other transducers you may see as a transfer mount formation, actually get mounted inside your hull. They sit in a fluid and it actually penetrates your hull. These are only good for fiberglass hulls, and if you make sure you've got a good fiberglass hull, if you have any air pockets in your fiberglass, it'll disturb your reading through the hull. Your temperature readings may not be as accurate with that type of installation. Usually recommend an external temperature probe be mounted. There's lots of NMEA probes that you can get to assist with that, but they're quite a good, if you're limited for real estate on the transom and don't want to be cutting holes through your boat, the wet box mounts are quite good and very successful transducers. Over to the next slide. Just a very quick
question there from Justin, mate, about depths for using high chirp. What depth range would you recommend for high chirp?
Ultimately, from shallow water, I'm just thinking of a 175, like your SS 175 high wide, or your transom mount TM 185 high wide. They're rated to about 400 meters of depth. I have seen them hit bottom quite easily in deeper water, like getting up to maybe 5 or over 500 meters. But an ideal depth range, it really depends on your target, what type of area you're fishing. For your offshore fishermen, most of the time you're focusing on the top of the water column, the top 100 meters, and then your inshore is usually shallower than that as well. So high chirp is good at painting a really good picture, but depth can be limited. It depends what you call shallow and what you call deep. I think everyone's interpretation may be a little bit different to that.
Matthew's got a question about a dirty hull. Does a dirty hull or a rough anti-foul or wormholes or whatever affect the clarity of your image?
If you have a moored boat that has quite a bit of growth, barnacles, algae, anything that may be attached to the bottom of the hull, if you creating dirty water where your transducer is sitting, it will affect the reading of your hull. So ideally, you want your transducer in as clean of water as possible. It'll give you the best reading. A little bit of a telltale if your installation is okay. If you're getting a good picture when you're still or very slow moving, and then as you start to accelerate, you start to lose image and you start to get a lot of, you can see the air bubbles you'll pick up and you get a lot more noise, then that may be linked to your transducer placement. In line with your hull, you may have a planing strake, a chine, a water pickup in front of it. There may be, it's barnacles, something like that. If there is anything that will disturb water in front of your transducer, that will affect the reading that you get. The new Simrad S-Series sonar, only units coming. No idea. No idea.
Stay tuned for that, guys. Maybe post a question on the Simrad Yachting Facebook page. I'm sure the guys at Simrad will be able to give you
if you're
an
referring
update.
to like the S209 or the S2016, your standalone sonar units, your guess is as good as mine. It'd be nice to see something come up, but the Simrad S209 is probably one of my favourite. Is definitely my favourite standalone sonar. It's a fantastic unit. So couldn't imagine they could get much better than that at the moment. But I'm sure Simrad will come out with something.
Right, well, we've got a bunch of questions coming in, guys. Keep them coming. We won't get to them all straight away. We'll wade through them in time,
kayaks,
though. So.
Yes, 100%. A lot of kayak fishermen are mounting. Sorry, I forgot about you guys. Through hull, they get shoot through hull, and there's also some special mounts that you can buy where the transducer will sit in, and there are ways of gluing or epoxying transducers into your kayak. Placement wouldn't be as critical on a kayak as long as it's nice in the water and comes in good contact with the hull. That's the important thing.
Yeah. So, Neil and Jake, I've got your questions up on the screen, guys. I haven't missed them. We'll come back to those in just a moment. We might continue on with the presentation though, because we have got a few more slides to get through. So
that's right.
Anton, we'll let you get on with this one.
Very quickly. So, transfer mount transducers. Ideally, clean water flowing over the transducer and starboard side so you don't get the upward stroke of the prop. You can mount them on the port side depending on the prop rotation, and cats and twin hulls have always got a bit of a quirk when it comes to mounting. You always just find the cleanest water away from any obstructions. If you go through next slide quickly. If there's any fittings in front of your transducer like that, any through-hole water pickups, anything, temperature sensors, bilge outlets, anything like that, you always make sure if you look up your hull, there's nothing in the way. You want as clean water as possible in the hull. When it comes through to mounting, go to the next one. Yeah, so small kick down, making sure that the tail is just slightly down, and that you've got clean water going over the face of the transducer. So the next slide will give you a little bit of an idea of what, when it's flat, slightly tail down, your arches will be better. If you're too far tail down, go to the next one. Your arch, you still read it, but you'll start to get the half arches like that. And if you go to the next one, this is the worst case scenario you can get because you actually cause cavitation under the water when you're moving. The water tries to separate, creates air bubbles. You may get a reading at when you're very slow or still, but as soon as you start to move, that water is disturbed. You got yourself at a big disadvantage to start off with. So you do not want that. Where the tail down is good, flat is great, tail up, you don't want that to happen at all. You're better to be tail down than tail up with every transducer.
So a question from Robert, Anton, he's saying that he agrees with you, however, the S2009 is limited due to the old blue plug.
Yeah, understood. So there is an adapter cable available that you can run with the XID, and it still does fully. The 2009 will still give you all the custom frequencies that a XID transducer, exonic transducers will give you, so you can dial in your custom frequencies. Understand that it may be a little bit limited with the single channel Chirp, but again, for the money, it's a fantastic unit. Again, I love them. I love the S209. I'll have a few screenshots to show you in a moment too. So. Does TVG affect the sensitivity gain? A little bit. So TVG, time variable gain, I didn't actually put anything on that in the presentation, but it won't Okay, short answer, it won't affect your sensitivity gain. It may interfere a little bit with the top, the very, very top of the water column, but it shouldn't interfere with that at all. Any more questions there come up?
Yeah, look, there are. Maybe we'll continue with those for just a moment. Yeah, so we've got a question from Jake. Let me bring that up on the screen. So Jake's asking whether you can link a 9-inch Elite TI2 to an S2009 with a 1 kilowatt tranny.
You can connect your Elite TI2 via NMEA only. The Elite doesn't have a Ethernet connection to allow it to share sonar if you did. But you can connect an Elite TI2 to an S209 and you'll be able to mark waypoints. The good feature with an S209, you can actually scroll back, you can hit new waypoint and it will pop up on your TI2. Just make sure that you have your NMEA share waypoints. There'll be a bit of a data option and you should be able to do that, no problem.
And Jake, if you get stuck with that, we'll put up a link shortly to Anton's Facebook group, and he'll be able to help you out with that sort of one-on-one if you need help with that. So I've got a few more coming through. So Matthew Grays, I'm going to have to read this one out to you, Anton, because only part of it's going to come up on the screen. But when I'm fishing in 90 to 100 meters, my high-wide transducer holds bottom nicely, but the low-frequency transducer only picks up fish when traveling 10 Ks or less. Why is this? As soon as I knock it into gear and accelerate, I get a lot of noise on the screen.
So the high-wide will hold bottom a lot nicer than the low frequency. When you start getting over 10 knots, low frequency is prone to a lot more noise. It's not ideal. You won't be picking up fish. It pulses into the water far less than a high-frequency transducer. The high-frequency transducer, which would just say 200 kilohertz, is pulsing 4 times more, and with your chirp it's increased again. So low frequency get a lot more noise, a lot more interference, and not as much detail. As simple as that. Liken it to your maybe like a car speaker, a subwoofer bass travels, but you're not hearing. You can travel far, but you may not be able to hear as well as you would with some of your high frequency noises that have a lot more directional, a lot more information, but it won't travel as far. Yeah, I hope that made some sort of sense there too.
If not, guys, you can always post a question again. If you don't get an answer that completely satisfies you, we're here to make sure you
get Elite 7 to an Elite 9 NMEA backbone starter kit will be all that you need. I'm sure you could pick them up from your marine stores. I'm thinking that they're only about $60, $70. There's a couple of T-pieces, some end connectors, and what you have to do is you have to build a NMEA 2000 backbone, and then you'll be able to connect your Elite TI to your TI units. Yeah.
So a question from Tim about 3-in-1 transducers. With the 3-in-1 transducer, should you put that near the primary or on the opposite side of the motor?
Ideally, it should be near your 275. You'd mount it near your traditional sonar. It should be just below and as close as possible without interfering. You can definitely mount it on the opposite side of the motor if you have limited space. The only time, if you're ever doing a downscan overlay, something like your fish reveal, something like that may cause you a little bit of a distortion, not distortion, but the information will be a little bit skewed that you're getting on your screen. So keeping them close together will be, as close together, starboard side of your boat, that'll be good. I actually think we had a diagram showing that in the next slide there.
Okay, we can bring up the slides again if you like. Just bear with me a moment.
So,
how does that look?
Yep. So your traditional sonar is on the right-hand side. On the outside and the inside, slightly lower, is your structure scan because it's such a lot more wider beam. yeah, having it on the inside and just below is better, and that paints you a better picture for your downscan overlays and everything like that. Will be a lot more accurate.
So Cliff's asking, if we put two transducers near each other, are they going to interfere with your sonar signal?
If they're mounted in a way that they can interfere with each other, as in physically disturbed water from one transducer may affect the other, yes. So you want to make sure that they're both, they can be close together. And if you're running two transducers, say two separate units, and you're running the same frequency, they will interfere with each other. If you run them on different frequencies, no problem. You'll get away with that, not a problem at all. So just make sure that they both don't disturb each other and that they're different frequencies, and that will certainly, they certainly will work.
So the questions keep coming, mate. So Andrew, McNaby or McNabo, I'm sorry, my eyesight's terrible. So Andrew is asking, in your opinion, for the best all-round setup for blue water shallow and super deep water fishing to cover all angles.
Okay. Super deep, best all-round for blue water shallow, super deep. Okay, blue water fishing, your high-frequency wide beam, your 175 high wides for your through hole. The transom mount will be a TM185 high wide. And for a dual frequency, TM275 low high wide, or there's pocket mount, the CM chest mount, or the if you have a larger boat, the gentleman before said it had a B275 low high wide. The 275 low high wide has a high frequency high wide beam, and it has a low frequency which is also a wide beam, so that the angle coverage is quite good. If I had to pick a single channel transducer that'll be the best all round, I'd probably go for a medium chirp, something like your 185 TM185M, SS185M. That's a really good choice for your best all round for depth penetration and for painting a good picture. But when you refer to blue water fishing and you're talking pelagic species, mid-water column to the top of the water column, a high wide. As long as you've got high wide in the model, yeah, you'll be on onto a good start.
And another one from Matthew. So he's asking, do we think that the manufacturers will ever get together and build a common head unit so they don't have to worry about the software?
Probably not. Too many. That'd be like asking Ford and Holden to get together and build the same car. I don't think that's going to happen. If that's my interpretation of the question. So yeah, there's quite a few manufacturers there. They all have their the pros and cons. I guess there's always some features that some people like from some models. They may dislike on others, and that's why there are options. I mean, even if you look at a mobile phone, a Samsung and an iPhone, they're two competing companies. They have, I suppose, there are some pros and cons to having both those units too.
All right, let's return back to our presentation now. I think. Oh no, sorry, we've got one from Cliff. So
why has the Evo 3 push on the waypoint to go to disappeared, as was on the Evo 2? I'm not sure, because in the sidebar menu you should be able to push the waypoint, and there'll be a navigation go-to option, and it depends on what software you're running. That maybe it disappeared, but it should still be there.
All right, just had a question come through from Tim. So once again, I'll have to read it to you, mate. But do you use the 3-in-1 transducer to mark fish either side of the boat in blue water situations? What sort of range to the side could we expect?
Depending on the detail that you're expecting, the 3-in-1 transducer is, again, it's one of my favorites. I think this is just an amazing transducer. It gives the option of medium chirp, high chirp, your 83 kilohertz and your 200 kilohertz, and also your 455 and 800, which is your downscan and your structure scan. That has, from a blue water perspective, 40 to 50 meters on the side is easy. I've used it myself marking schools of bait, and school bluefin tuna out in Port Fairy in some pretty average conditions. And I've marked, I think I have the settings to about 60 or 80 metres either side of the boat, and I was picking up bait and turning on them and hooking up on some bluefin 40 or 50 metres away. I would assume that mackerel fishing up north would be similar.
All right, so well done, mate. We've managed to catch up with all the questions, so let's just pop back to our presentation.
Yep.
And continue on with that. I'm assuming you want me to jump to the next one.
We'll go on to the next one. So Downscan, skip over straight to the next one. So Downscan. So on that one, we've got the couple of images side by side. High frequency, low frequency, and the downscan, which would be the 455 or your 800 kilohertz. So the narrow and wide angle. So you can see the difference. This is the same bottom that it's painting across the three different frequencies, and the different results that you get. So the furthest to the left of your screen is your high frequency, which is a little bit narrower, paints the bottom quite good, gives you a little bit of that structure. Your next picture with that the wavy bottom, yeah, you've lost quite a bit of it because it's such a wide beam. You've lost a bit of your bottom shape, and then you go to your downscan. Downscan paints the bottom with extreme detail. You'll see it's with a couple of images come up. Go on to the next one.
Just bear with me a moment, mate. I'm experiencing some difficulties. Here we go.
That's all right. Traditional sonar cone angle, looking from the top down, paints a rather round or maybe a slightly oval shape depending on your transducer. And then if you click on downscan, is a very precise instrument, gives you a lot of detail, very fine beam, wide, but it goes out a lot wider and can paint a lot more higher detail. You see with the return. If you go on to the next slide. That's actually an old school bus. I think this is from the US in a dam or an impoundment. You can actually see just off the school bus there's a school of fish hanging off. Those little dots that you see is actually a school of fish, and compared to the size of the bus, and you see the detail, you can actually see the windows of that bus. Go on to the next one. That's actually the bus that's been recovered from that after they found it on Downscan. Go on to the next slide.
Gee, I wonder what that could be.
Any guesses? Yeah. Go on to the next screen. That's what they've recovered. So that's the downscan, the detail that you can get with your downscan that adds. So fish finding ability amongst structure is great. Doesn't paint the full arches that you'll get on your traditional sonar, but very high detail. So bottom structure, bottom shape paints a very accurate picture. This is where the go on to the next slide. The fish reveal that's available now. On the left-hand side is your sonar, and then there's just your normal downscan. Click onto the next one. What fish reveal does is actually paints, go back one. The fish reveal actually paints the sonar and it overlays it over into the downscan. So it gives you the best of both worlds. Great bottom detail and good fish finding ability. So that's where you get your little arches and it merges with it, because your downscan won't give you the arches like it would because of such a narrow beam. Click over a couple of slides here and we'll go to the...
Before we do that, mate, just brought up a quick question from Justin. So he's made a comment that he's never been able to mark fish on the side scan, even though fish are around me everywhere. Is there a certain depth the fish have to be in the water to be able to cast a shadow?
It depends on... look, without knowing the exact circumstances or seeing a screenshot of the settings, there's potential for sensitivity to be turned down. When you set your side scan depth, set your range on your side scan 3 times to 4 times the depth that you're fishing in an ideal world. Obviously, you may be limited. If you're fishing in 100 meters of water, you're not going to set it out to 400 meters. It's useless at that range. But if you're in 10 meters of water, setting it to 30 or 40 meters on the side, should be able to see it. Now, remember, they're very fine detail. You're not looking for big, thick red arches that you would with your traditional sonar. You may be looking for smaller blobs, again, without knowing exactly what type of areas you're fishing, what your target fish and what sort of structure. You should be able to see something. You should be able to see something there. Just make sure 3 to 4 times your depth you set your structure scan out to.
Now, guys, you'll notice that Anton can't see this, but you guys can. In the chat feed for this stream, I've just put a link to Anton's Facebook group, which is the Simrad and Lawrence Electronics Users group. So I've put that link there so that if you do have questions at the end of this, or if you just want to get involved with this group and find out what Anton does and get more information and more help with your sonar, you can jump over there and do that. So, Anton, we've got to pause in the questions. I'm going to take you back to the presentation, mate.
Okay. Sonar, downscan, side scan. So click through just a little bit. That's the difference with the side scan, how it works. It's actually painting a wider picture to help you better understand. If you go into the next one, it'll paint a bit of another picture of how the side scan actually works in the water column and what you're looking at. This is the reason why I'm saying when you're setting your range to 3 to 4 times your depth on average as a guide, and it starts to paint a picture sideways a bit more, and I liken it to an MRI or a CAT scan, where it's taking little slices of water of the water column, and it's building a picture as you're going along. So it's not a high speed. It's not a high-speed transducer by any means. This is a precision tool. It gives you a very high detail, and moving at a slow, steady pace in calmer water paints a better picture. So go on. That's actually a picture of a couple of divers going under the boat. So the traditional sonar on the bottom right, and the divers up on the left, and if you click over again, they're the divers on the side scan. See, they've thrown a little bit of a shadow. Their air bubbles coming out of the tanks have thrown a little bit of a shadow over the ground. Yeah, that's trying to give you a bit of understanding of that. Tedesco Reef, Port Phillip Bay. Hopefully we've got a few bay fishermen. I think I saw Paul Lazzapardi here before. He loves his snapper fishing in Port Phillip Bay. Tedesco Reef is made up of all these little concrete ball structures, and going over it with your side scan, go into the next frame. That's what it actually looks like. It's painted that picture of those little balls on the ground as you're going over it. The next one is another mark. That's a outer artificial at Carrum. It's an old sunken barge that's been there for many years. That's what it actually looks like with the structure scan. Going forward, we'll go over to the next, skip through again on that one. Active imaging 3-in-1 starts showing you quite a bit more detail. This is a old amphitheater, I think, in a dam in the US that they've gone over. And go over to the next one. Little school of fish. So this is a 100-foot range. So we're talking about 33 meters, and that's what the picture that's the type of picture that it paints. So when you're looking, to the gentleman's question just before, that might be what he needs to be looking at, looking for little blobs like that, little shadows, and getting a bit more detail. We'll go over.
Yep, no worries. Tim's just asked a question, mate. Can he run the 3-in-1 side scan with his 200 kilohertz on the same unit simultaneously?
Yes, you can. If you're running side scan and 200 kilohertz, no problem. Some units can't run a side scan or structure scan and high chirp, but you certainly can with 200 kilohertz and the 3-in-1. Yeah, no issues there whatsoever. If you're using a 3-in-1, avoid the same frequency.
Yep, so another similar question from Justin. So when using the fish reveal on the 3-in-1 transducer, can you only run the 455 and 800 kilohertz? Hasn't been able to run the 200 kilohertz with
it. Fish reveal shows if you split the screen with different frequencies, but your fish reveal will actually be utilizing both the frequencies to paint the picture there. So your downscan over the top of your traditional sonar frequency, and it merges those two pictures together and gives you your fish reveal structure. Yeah.
All right, so we'll go back to our PowerPoints, Anton.
Again, active imaging, just another picture of reef.
Sorry, I'm jumping around here just to keep you on your toes.
Okay. So just a bit of a difference there between the HDS Live 3-in-1 versus the Carbon with your total scan or structure scan. So you can see a lot more, a lot higher detail. So the technology is coming along quite nicely. Yep. Again, just a detailed comparison. Very quick couple of tips. Using the sensitivity or gain to adjust surface clutter is not recommended because you may be reducing the surface clutter at the cost of detail further down in your water column, and detail is what you want. So sometimes it's about a matter of interpreting what you have on your screen. You don't want to lose information. So surface clarity helps. Noise rejection can help. Sensitivity and gain, make sure your water column, it's painting a nice picture and it's giving you as much information as possible in the entire water column when you're looking. And then your next thing would be your color. So you don't want to have your color line set too low, or you don't want it too high. Having nice so you get the various colors, so it can give you an idea of the strength of return that you're getting. Your reds is your strongest, and then your on your Lowrance you have blacks, little specks of black that you may get, and then you go into your blues and your greens as your softer returns for your different color palettes. I think that might be it for that part, and we got a few. I think we're going to the screenshots after this.
Yep, we can go to the screenshots, no problem whatsoever. Let's do that. Let's bring you up on the screen as well, though, mate. So
yep. Okay, this is a Simrad S209 with a high wide, high chirp. Port Phillip Bay. The squiggly green lines that you see up the top is a handful of pellets we've thrown in the water. That big red line that you see zigzagging going down is a pilchard that is drifting down in the water column, and those couple of little marks down the bottom are some hungry snapper. You see that little mark there in the middle, and it's actually got a slight kick up. I believe that fish has had a bit of an interest and has actually swum up to see what has gone on. I don't remember the result of this one, whether we did we're successful or not. I'd like to think that we were, but we might have been. We'll go on to the next one. Now, again, Port Phillip Bay again. This was April a few years back. We were sounding, this is a S209 again with a Lowrance HST DFSBL. It's a 600 watt deep water transducer, which has got a bit of a narrower beam. Those little ticks, the eyebrows that you see there, are a couple of snapper. We were sounding over away from this little bit of a reef structure. We're marking up these fish. And if you go over to the next frame, that is a few minutes later, the same fish. We stopped, drifted over them. As I started to get that little green mark on the edge of the screen, right on the right hand of the screen, I dropped a soft plastic down. And as I turned around to the sounder, I could just see this little thing. And I said to my friend, "Hey, that looks like the snapper's coming up." And I hooked up straight away. We repeated that probably 4 or 5 times that day. Exact same circumstances, a scenario, everything, just the stars aligned. It was fantastic. But even with the narrow beam transducer, we were able to pinpoint those fish and literally drop a soft plastic on their head as we were drifting over them. So there were 2 to 3 kilo snapper. Go to the next slide. This one I put up just to give you an idea of the actual, this is low chirp, and we were moving at pretty slow speed. And you see the color, the definition is a little bit funny. There's a little bit more haze on the screen. The bottom doesn't read as well. So that was a snapper. That actually was too far off the mark of where we caught those other fish with the high chirp. So this is low chirp, wide beam, and the detail that it gives you is not as much detail, but certainly did paint the picture. But we weren't marking as many fish as we were on high chirp. Marlin fishing, Bermagui. This was on the 12-mile reef. Now, if you look at the bottom, you'll see the bottom of the image. It's about 60. That depth, 58.6, is actually in fathoms. So we're talking about 115, 120 meters of water. That is literally bait. That is slimy mackerel and cow and young, almost from the bottom of the seafloor to the top. That is 115 meters of water. If you look very closely, you'll see in the top right-hand corner, right on the red temp line, you'll see a little thin green arch. That was a black marlin that we hooked up moments after passing. So we focused on this area. We could see the split in the baits, the split in the water column, and just that little hook that we got on the top was enough for me to go back around and have a look. And yeah, we hooked up to got my mate onto a nice black marlin that day. Next one. A little bit further off the reef, I think maybe a little bit later in the day, couple of marlin that we picked up off the edge. So the bait started to drop away. There's a few splits in the middle of the bait that highlighted to me that there was a bit of activity. It wasn't just a solid, all the green scattered bait that you see to the left of it. And you see there's a bit of a red ball that started to concentrate. That meant that the marlin were actually tightening in on a particular area. So that was an area that's worth focusing. And again, this is all Simrad S209 and the DFSBL Lowrance 600 watt transducer, narrow beam. Next one. Again, another marlin, just off bait. Go on to the next one.
Quick question from Andrew Aaron before we continue on. He's asking what situations to adjust scroll speeds to get a clearer reading.
I tend to avoid adjusting scroll speeds, certainly, for myself, but deep water, and I'm talking 400, 500, even 600 meters of water, when you're drifting, you can adjust your scroll speed to, instead of giving you long squiggly lines, it will paint a shorter picture, a bit more like an arch for fish. But generally, I don't tend to adjust my scroll speed. I just leave them at max. Let the information come to me live and as much detail as possible. All
right, another question that's just come through from Braden asking about When you're at anchor under 5 metres, is it best to pause your transducer ping so as to not scare off the fish? And I tell you what, Braden,
This
is the eternal debate.
A debate that has been going on ever since Sounders Sonar has come into play. I have people swear that they think the transducer pings scare fish off. I have other people saying doesn't affect it. I am literally sitting on the fence. When I'm at anchor, I do tend to turn the unit off or pause it, just because I don't want to be distracted from the goal. If I'm snapper fishing in Port Phillip Bay, and you tend to keep looking at the sonar every few minutes, and you think, oh geez, there's nothing there. Oh geez, there's nothing there, and you pull up, pick, and try to move very quickly. There's not much in the way of information that you can get unless the fish is actually swimming under your boat. So I would lean more towards pausing the transducer or turning it off rather than leaving it on.
And a question from Cliff about whether he'd get the same kind of return with his Evo 3 as you're getting in this image here, mate.
You would probably get a very similar, if not the same sort of results. The SS75M, I'm actually quite a bit of a fan of a through-hole 600-watt medium chirp transducer, for those who may not be familiar with it. Yes, you would. The Evo 3, you'd get a similar, a little bit better. Maybe you might read a little bit better at speed, being a through-hole. They tend to, if they're mounted correctly, tend to give you quite a good reading at speed. I
think that's it for the questions for the moment, mate. So yeah, no more coming up just at the moment, guys. If you got more, please feel free to pop them in the chat there. Do you want to continue on with the screenshots?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. We can go on to the next one. Later that day, this is the same day that we got the black marlin off the bait on the 12 mile. We've actually moved out to the bait hole because it gone quiet. The bait had moved on. I noticed a little bit of a speck, the scattering of bait down quite low, and that little red squiggle, I'm assuming, is a marlin, because we go to the next slide. That's, I'm assuming, is the same fish again that has moved up a little bit higher in the water column. We did a few circles around it, but that's as high as that fish came up that day. So the next day, we went back to that spot and we were greeted by about another half a dozen boats, and it was mayhem. There were lots of marlin caught in that exact same spot the next day where we marked that single fish. So that was quite interesting that we saw that. That was a bait hole at Bermagui. We were lucky enough to see a few fish there. For the next one. Now, same unit, Simrad S209. This is with a high wide. This is with a 275 low wide, but this would be the same as a 175 high wide or a 185 high wide transom mount. That's the first time after I mounted the new transducer, went out to give it a water test. Did not have a rod on my boat, and I was marking snapper after snapper like that, and I'd never seen so many fish in the water. I was absolutely blown away. I did 0 to the settings. I dialed down the sensitivity a little bit. This is high chirp in 9.3 meters of water, and that was the return that I got on that one. So yeah, we're quite happy with the results.
Got a couple of questions coming through again, mate. I might just bring a couple of those up. So yep. Mario is asking about, he's just installed a unit on his boat, and he's wanting to know what model of transducer you'd use in Western Port for gummies.
Western Port for gummies. Now, sounding gummies is pretty difficult. They're very fast moving fish, and they live in very tidal water. So for myself, I'd be using your structure scan, your side scan, and probably your high wide, using your high chirp. The high chirp on your 3-in-1 gives you a little bit of a narrower beam, and it will help pick up those ledges and those drop-offs that you want to target when you're fishing for gummies in Western Port. Western Port, literally, Hastings boat ramp is less than 15 minutes from my house here, and do fish it quite often, so it's quite familiar with that. Yeah, high chirp, narrow beam with your 3-in-1. So that's it.
Excellent. And
Vertical
another question from
breaks
Cliff.
in reading while traveling. So that could be an install. So two things. Depends on what the vertical breaks that you refer. If it's a vertical break, as in it's a gap in your transducer. So you've got sounding gap, sounding gap, sounding gap. It's an installation. You're getting air under your under the face of the transducer. So you might have to reconsider the position. If you get good readings while you're traveling slowly or you're still, and then all of a sudden you speed up and you start seeing that, you're getting disturbed water under your hull.
All right, momentary pause in the questions there, so we'll go back to the last of our screenshots. Tell us what we're looking at here, mate.
High chirp, wide beam, S209 again, and that one is I believe that one was a school of, that one's in a school of Australian salmon that were chasing, looking for some live bait. I think these are only around about a 400, 500 gram fish, but that the water was absolutely boiling, full of fish, and it was as I was stopped, we started casting lures. The fish swam under the boat, and I took this screenshot. So that's where the solid red marks mean the fish have actually passed through the transducer beam quite well. Those little green hooks and little blue splatters that you see, sort of, I'll say in the background, means that those fish were right further out on the edge of the beam, so that didn't give you such a strong return. We'll go to the next one. This one was a school of bluefin tuna, small bluefin tuna that had passed through the boat, passed under the boat. As we had stopped, pulled the brakes on the boat and had a look, and I go, what was that in the water? And we actually saw them, and they swam literally right under my boat. And we saw them, didn't want to take a lure that day, but we saw them swim under the boat. That was quite frustrating, as school bluefin tuna can be. Next one, again, that's Australian salmon, a little bit further out. We had another big school. Same circumstances as the one that was a couple of screenshots before that. We'll go on to the next one. Kingfish. Kingfish on reef. So this is, you can see the ground has got quite a bit of an undulation, very rocky, rugged ground, and that's how we all know that kingfish love to, type of areas that we love to target kingfish in, especially in our local waters here in Victoria. Yeah, being quite shallow off a bit of a rocky headland, and that's what a kingfish would look like on the sounder. The next one. This is a very similar area, but you can see they're holding on the edge of the reef. There's a little bit of a drop off there, and they're holding onto the edge. It may have been the same school of fish, and memory's a bit foggy on this one. We may have gone back around and actually travelled over the edge of the reef and different. It was the same school, but in a different, travelling in a different direction. We picked them up off on the edge. This is Kingfish again, Simrad Evo 3 with the active imaging 3-in-1. As we've come up over the top of the reef, we started to pick up some little specks there on the side. So we were slow trolling live baits this day. And if you go over to the next screen, I believe this was maybe about 15-20 minutes later, as we did a few circles around, we came back over it and dropped some baits down, and you can actually see the kingfish going down. So you see the red lines where they're actually squiggling, going down a little bit squiggly. That is the kingfish in the water column following the bait down. And then a few moments later, we hooked up. Literally, I hooked up, busted off on my fish, and a few moments later, my friend good friend, Navico sales rep Bill Malonis, hooked up. And if you go to the next frame, that's actually a screenshot of the fish that came close to the boat and circled around with a couple of its buddies. And bit of a break, and he's come back again. That's all bait on the bottom. There was lots of bait there that day on this reef, and we fought the fish, and a few minutes later we landed a 12.8, 12.6 kilo kingfish there in pretty shallow water. So that was quite exciting when you're interpreting and looking at the screen, seeing almost live action like that, and then to be able to convert it into a fantastic fish. I don't know, did we have the photo of the actual fish attached there?
Yeah, we did. Let me just scroll forward. There we go.
There it is. That's the result of that one. So I'm very happy Bill with that. Just don't remind him that I actually would have won a online tournament that was being run by the Victorian Game Fishing Club at the time. But I think we were quite happy eating smoked kingfish and sashimi for a few days thereafter.
Excellent stuff. Anton, it's been absolutely fabulous. We have got a few more questions that have come through, so we might just knock those over. And then, mate, I think you've earned a cold beer tonight, an hour and a half nearly of streaming. So Andrew's asking, have you ever run 2-3 kilowatts transducers, and why do you need it? What's the advantage?
For, I would say, 99% of the fishing that recreational anglers do, you don't need it. 1 kilowatt is more than enough to do what we need. A lot of 2 and 3 kilowatt transducers are narrow beam, deep water. So I know that there's some of the pocket mount, wet box mount, like an R509 AMR transducer. They're 2 and 3 kilowatt. Punch, you'll be picking up specs in 1,200 meters of water. I've got a screenshot of one that was in a large boat of Bermagui that picked up the bottom in over 1,000 fathoms of water, like 1,000. That's two kilometers deep, and we've hidden the bottom. I'm not sure what type of fish you're targeting. If you're deep dropping for some of your deep water ooglies, your blue eye, your hapuka, some of your gemfish. A lot of the times these fish are actually out of our range. So if you can afford it, maybe. Is it needed? Not really. Not for a lot of fishing that we do. That starts to go up into a lot more of your semi-commercial and your specialist fishing for deep water.
All right. Great question from Serge. Can you sound up King George whiting in Port Phillip Bay?
100%. King George whiting tend to show up as little squiggles down the bottom. They hug the bottom, and they move very fast through the water, and you'll pick them up just like you would similar to a lot of bait fish, but on the bottom. Identifying them off the bottom compared to some of the weedy patches that you get can be a bit difficult. It's all about reading and just paying careful attention to your sounder and seeing what comes past as you're scrolling through. So short answer, yes.
All right, another one from Luke. So his P66 runs perfect and clear at speed through the bay, but when he's offshore in 50 metres plus, the screen clutters really badly at speed.
P66 is a little bit getting into a little bit of an older transducer. Still a great transducer, a little bit of older technology. They run a wider beam than some other transducers, and running the 200 kilohertz frequencies. They do struggle with depth. The P66 doesn't really get into your deep. When we start talking 100, 150 meters and that, it's not ideal. I wouldn't really recommend it, but yeah, it's just the might be a transducer upgrade on the cards if you want to start fishing offshore a little bit more. Again, a bay fisherman, if you're referred to bays in your Port Phillip Bay and you do a lot of snapper fishing and you do pelagics, your high wide is a fantastic option for both of those. Port Phillip Bay is a very flat area, and it just so happens to be a perfect transducer for your offshore species as well.
So Scott's asked, would you downscan them? I think this is the King George whiting question again. Whiting, would you downscan them?
Downscan, again, they'll show up as very, very fine specs. Your structure scan again, referring back to the gentleman that asked about the squid, about being able to sound squid before, being able to sound them, but whiting move very fast. If you sound them, pretty much by the time you're dropping your anchor and start fishing for them, they may be in the area, they may not. You're very active form of fishing when you're chasing King George whiting. Using structure scan or your down scan to identify weed beds and sand patches that people can start targeting is a great tool, especially if you're fishing in like Western Port Bay. Can be quite murky, quite very, very tidal and quite murky. It's very hard to see sand patches at times. Using a structure scan to be able to identify that amongst the weed, that's a great tool and will really help with your success on King George whiting.
Good stuff. Okay, a question from Anthony. What are your views on mounting a 3-in-1 transducer directly to the bottom of the hull using Sikaflex?
Yep, a lot of people do it. It's great. It's almost like having a through-hole transducer with the benefits of the 3-in-1. If your hull allows for it, it is a good option. Me personally, I have a Haynes signature boat. It's got a variable dead rise. It's very tricky to try and get good transducer placement on, but some other hulls, certainly some people have had some great success with it. So a lot of people will go out and buy the equipment and say, "Oh, hang on, it's not." You can fine tune transfer mount positions to work. In most cases, it's a very neat installation, having it stuck under your hull, but do you have to do it? No. Should you do it? Can you do it? Yeah, there's nothing to stop you from doing that at all.
Good stuff. Another question from Andrew. He's asking, this again, I think with the 2 and 3 kilowatt transducers, will they help with marking black marlin?
No. Will they? Yes, they will mark marlin. Do you need it? No. Again, for marlin fishing, 1 kilowatt, 175 high wide, 185 high wide. They probably might go to transducers, 275 low high wide. Running that high chirp wide beam is excellent. I couldn't imagine much better transducer to be able to mark up bait, mark up marlin, and be able to pick up fish that way. So it's a really good tool.
Good stuff. Tim's asking, do you think the active imaging 3-in-1's better than the high chirp for shallow water situations?
Well, yeah, I think the 3-in-1 is a really good option for shallow water. It's a great transducer for the money, value for money. Again, I think you're talking a fraction of the price of the 275. Gives you more options with your side scan, structure scan, down scan, fish reveal. It's a great option for shallow water. You know, your estuarine, your bay, shallow inshore. I mean, you saw the Kingfish images I put up just before was with a 3-in-1 just running 200 kilohertz. We're in 20 to 30 meters of water. We're marking up bait, marking up fish. Excellent. The elements of the 275 low, high, wide are a lot higher quality. They're a lot larger, so some of the detail you will get is better. But if you're in the situation to be able to run both, certainly do it. Just run different frequencies, and I think you'll be in good money. But yeah, 3-in-1's a great option for shallow water.
Oh, we've got a happy customer, so good on you, Andrew. Thank you for letting us know.
Again, there's a lot of good people, myself, and there's a heap of helpful people on that page. You're more than welcome to come on and grab any information.
Guys, let me just put that.
Usually, a lot of helpful people willing to help there. So.
Anton, I've just put that link up again. So, guys, if you're looking at the chat, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, if you're looking at the chat, I put up a link to that group, so you can go straight through there from that link. I got another question from Mario. It's a two-part question because he's added a correction to it. I'll read you the first bit and I'll correct it. So he's asking not what sonar, but what transducer should he use for King George whiting in Western Port?
3-in-1. If you have a Evo 3 or a HDS Live, it's probably one of your best options to be able to run structure scan to find your weed beds. For an older unit, something like an LSS2 structure scan as well will give you a really good result. again, targeting whiting in an area where you know that the fish may be, again, wouldn't specifically be sounding out fish, but I'd be looking to target the areas where I know that they'd inhabit, pick up the sand holes in amongst the weed, try your luck, 10, 15, 20 minutes. If nothing's there, move on to the next sand hole. And once you find a fish and they go off the bite, it's a matter of following them down tide, follow them with the tide up and down. That's been the key to success for most people I know with their whiting fishing. So,
no, we've got a similar question here about mulloway. So, any tips for marking mulloway on the
silver
3-in-1?
Now, mulloway, not really a strong point of mine, but again, from what I understand of the fish, it's about the structure where they're likely to be holding. Again, I haven't been fortunate enough to catch mulloway myself, so I wouldn't be able to give you a lot of tips there. But the only thing that I would say is that if there is a particular area that you're focused on, looking for the structure that they may be likely to hold mulloway, and but actually marking mulloway, I think maybe more so your structure scan or your Downscan to be able to find them lurking amongst the snags and the reefs.
And Tim, the first of these live streams that we did for this Sonar Masterclass series was actually Michael Guest talking about finding mulloway on a sonar. So if you zap over to drlewis.com, you'll find that replays there. It's on YouTube as well. And Guesty goes into quite some detail and shows lots of screenshots of mulloway as well, so he might be able to help you out with that. So a question from Tim about transducer. What's a great Chirp transducer to use for 50 to 100 metres?
Raymarine Axiom. Not too familiar with the Raymarine units myself. Unfortunately, I've got something else that we usually do, being on the Novico Pro staff team. If there is similarities, I know, not sure exactly what type of fishing that you're doing, but some of the transducers that I mentioned earlier are transferable. The Airmar branded, the Airmar 175 high wide, TM 185 high wide, and that will I believe they will come with a plug that suits other brands. It's virtually the same transducer, does the same job, but it's just being read by a different head unit. So it's just a matter of a different plug. Some of the functionalities I'm not 100% sure, again with the Raymarine units, but that'd be a good starting point for you.
All right, a question from Brett. He has a Dragonfly 5 Pro, mainly fishing for demersals. Is it good enough to do the job, or if not, what would you recommend?
Dragonfly, I believe, is, correct me if I'm wrong, is one of the entry-level Raymarine units, I believe, depending on what sort of depth and what sort of detail. Again, I can't comment too much, but for my recommendation, demersal species, without knowing what sort of depth, you go into your entry level, something like your Elite TI2, gives you a good option for various frequencies to be able to run, and going up from there to your HDS Live and then your Simrad units as well. Look, it's more a matter of budget and the style of fishing that you're going to do. For me, it's very hard not to recommend either a Lowrance or a Simrad unit because I'm not too. I'll be honest. I'll say that there are a lot of other great units out there. For myself, I love using the Lowrance and Simrad units. So.
All right. Dario's asking, when sounding fish in PBB, what screen speed would you run?
Again, screen speed, scroll speed would be your maximum. When you're traveling in Port Phillip Bay, you tend to, when you're sounding, you may be doing, say, about a 4 to 6 knots when you're trying to cover ground. If you're targeting a particular area and you want a bit more detail, slow down to the 2 or 3 knots and get a bit more detail. It certainly does help. Port Phillip Bay is quite good, being quite a flat area. Fish stand out.
All All right, Andrew, you don't have to apologise, mate. We're here to answer questions, so keep asking them. It's all good. So why do anglers run the black background their sounders, and what's the difference?
You'll notice quite a few of my screenshots. It's personal preference. Some of the detail and the colours, the way they show up, it is purely a personal preference. The traditional Simrad background is a blue. The traditional Lowrance background is a white background. Now, there are a lot of colours that are interchangeable. Black, I prefer. The way my eyes look at the screen's a little bit different to everyone else's, and it depends on what hits. I think the detail for when I look at it with a black screen gives you a little bit of a different detail. Plus, when you're fishing dawn, dusk, and nighttime, I'm not really switching to night mode. A big white screen is very sheer at night and can be quite bright. Instead of having to turn down the backlight, and then you turn on the unit a few days later when you go out and you're going, hang on, what's going on here? I used to always catch myself out by having a turn down screen darkness, and then you go to start up a few days and you have a minor freak out thinking, hang on, what is going to happen to my unit here? So I just run a black background, and day or night, doesn't matter. That's personal preference.
Mario, no worries, mate. Glad we were able to help you. Tim Harris, have you had much use of the Simrad?
Yeah, I have played around with the Simrad Go units. Again, very easy to use. Full touch screen, gives you your side scan, your structure scan, and gives you traditional sonar. Charts are very good as well, and for the price, they're a really good unit for the price. So.
And I think this might be the last question for the evening, mate. So Cameron's asking, what's the best setting when you're going over the shelf for Harpooka and Blue Eye, HGS Live?
Harpooka and Blue Eye, I'm assuming you'll be fishing probably your 400 to 600 meter depth. So you're keeping your scroll speed at maximum, keeping your color line at around about your 80 to 82, and HGS Live, you'll be using low chirp, would probably be your best option for that as well. For most people, for most settings, whatever you're doing, with the Simrad and Lowrance units, number one thing, there's a lot of options available to you. There's a lot of things that you can change. Start with the basics. Just adjust your sensitivity to suit conditions. I usually tell people you have your gain set on auto, plus or minus 2. If you're going into deeper water, you may want to increase your sensitivity a little bit. In shallower water, maybe you want to decrease it. If it's a little bit murky, a little bit muddy or dirty, decrease it a little bit, but you don't want to sacrifice detail for a nice clean screen. That's rule number one. That's the one thing that I think is a big mistake people do. Oh, hang on, I'll dial down the sensitivity until I get a clean screen, but then you're missing out on a lot of information.
All right, we do have a couple more questions still trickling through. So Mario is asking about CMAP reveal.
Game changer for the offshore fishing. It is amazing as long as the area that you're fishing is covered. We're a little bit limited. It's in early days with the CMAP reveal at the moment, and it paints a really good 3D picture of the ground that you're looking at. So again, still relatively new, and there will be more and more areas coming. The map cards are a little bit because there's so much more detail on it. You're not getting an Australia-wide CMAP reveal card at the moment. Hopefully, they have something like that in the future. But yeah, it's a great. I know a few friends have gone out sword fishing to Bass Canyons and how to play around with it offshore at Portland, Port Fairy here in Victoria, and great. Really good, gives you a bit of a different perspective to what's down there and paints a nice picture.
All right. Now, we've had two questions. They're pretty much the same question. So Kenny's asked what's the difference between the Evo 3 and the Evo 3S?
Evo 3S, okay.
And Andrew's asked the same question. So
the biggest difference with the Evo 3 and the Evo 3S is processing power. It is faster. You'll notice I'm talking as if I've actually touched the unit yet. I haven't. I've got one on order already. I'm waiting for the stock to arrive. Evo 3S is supposed to be a lot faster, and from what I hear, when you're touching the screen and scrolling between functions, a lot faster. You can run your split screen. If you split your screen on some of the older units, they may tend to slow down just a little bit. With the Evo 3S being a faster processor, it's a lot faster. It's just like your PCs and computers, even your phones. You'll notice over the years getting faster and faster. The Evo 3S is quite a lot faster. There's a bit more information available online as to some of the key differences. There'll be some faster charting options, bit of flipping between screens, and processing power is a big one.
Excellent stuff. Now, Anton, it's been a marathon, mate. An hour and 45 minutes. I don't think you've stopped talking the whole time. You've still got your voice.
That's all right. Hopefully people got something out of it, may have picked up something. And if there's anything that anyone wants to ask, drop me a line on Facebook. Jump on the Simrad and Lawrence Marine Electronics page. There's lots of people willing to help, and there's so much to learn. And if anyone got something out of it, hopefully can help catch a fish.
I've put that link up once again, guys. So please go along there and ask whatever questions you like, and certainly touch base with Anton. Mate, it's been fantastic. We've got a bunch more questions coming through. You keen to continue on, or should we call it to a close?
I'm working early in the morning. I get to sleep in tomorrow. So if you want to,
all right,
if you want to keep going,
this man knows no limits. So Cameron's asking that the live head unit doesn't put out a full 1 kW.
2-channel, 1 kilowatt, 100%. So from the HTS Carbon onwards, we've had one dual channel 1 kilowatt. So older models were the 500 to 600 watt. And again, I'm just going to say, elaborate a little bit here. Don't be too fixated on power of transducers, processing power, being able to listen to the information and interpret that data is more important than the actual power that you're outputting. A 1 kilowatt transducer actually spends less than 1% of its life at 1 kilowatt. So it's quite simply. So yes, 1 kilowatt, but no. When chasing pelagics like marlin on the shelf.
So the rest of the question is, let me read it in full. So when chasing pelagics like marlin on the shelf, can you use a structure scan transducer even though it's beyond the maximum depth of about 50 meters, and will it read successfully?
Yes, you can. Setting your range for your structure scan or side scan can be a good tool for chasing pelagics because it's painting what's on the side of the boat instead of looking straight down with your standard sonar. Being able to pick up a patch of bait high up in the water column off to the port or starboard of the boat means you could have driven past something that you may not have been able to see on the surface, and you can target an area. So structure scan, as in your down scan, not so much, but your side scan, I think you can actually use as a good tool for chasing pelagics.
Good stuff. And look, that's definitely it now, Anton. So I really want to thank you for coming along and for all the great information you shared. And I also want to thank Navico and Simrad, of course, for putting this series on. And let everybody know that next week, so Monday the 27th of July at 8 o'clock, we'll have another Sonar Masterclass. We're going to have Dean Sylvester come along and talk to us about using our Lowrance units to find Murray cod. So I'm sure that's going to be very popular with a lot of people. So once again, Anton, it's been tremendous talking to you. Thanks so much for your time tonight and for all the answers you've given. Thank you to everybody who's come along, stayed here for the whole hour and 45 minutes, asked some great questions. We really appreciate that. So I'll talk to all you guys next week. Anton, I'm going to let you go, mate. Have a great evening. What's left of it.
Have a good night.
We'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye.
Cheers.